The second, the delegitimization of Israel under international law. It's not just international law, it's international human rights law, international humanitarian law, international criminal law. This is a subject about which literally not just a lecture can be given, but a book can be written. But you have it increasingly in the use and abuse of the principle of universal jurisdiction. You know, the first country to have invoked the principle of universal jurisdiction was Israel in the trial and prosecution of Adolf Eichmann. In other words, it's not universal jurisdiction per se that's a negative. It's the selective use of the principle of universal jurisdiction. It's the singling out of the state of Israel for trial and prosecution in Spain, in Belgium, in England. I can go on. That's the thing that is undercutting and delegitimating international criminal law and putting it to the use of the delegitimization of Israel under the cover of law. That's why all this thing becomes so Orwellian. You don't only have international criminal prosecutions. You have the advent of civil suits. You have civil suits proceeding right now through the Quebec courts, where you have Quebec and Canadian corporations being sued for their alleged relationship with supporting illegal settlements and the like. You have the decisions of the International Court of Justice. You have the procedure right now before the International Criminal Court, the Palestinian complaint there accusing Israel of war crimes, crimes against humanity. You have the multiple commissions of inquiry, of which Goldstone is just message and metaphor. You have the criminalization of the exercise of self-defense with respect to Israel does not only have followed with regard to Israel and the like. I can go on. You get the point. Using the entire corpus of law as part of the delegitimating paradigm under the cover of law with respect to Israel. Because under each of these rubrics, it's Israel that's in the docket of the accused, allegedly the people, the international community there as the plaintiff. The third is the marching of delegitimization under the banner of human rights. Again, the case study in this regard is the UN Human Rights Council. And Anne spoke about this yesterday. I don't know how many of us appreciate, and I've been there to the UN Human Rights Council, and I've seen it, that at every meeting of the UN Human Rights Council, the meeting begins with a permanent agenda item 7, which speaks of Israeli violations of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. Agenda item 8 is human rights violations in the rest of the world. So you have a kind of Alice in Wonderland situation where the guilt is predetermined and the sentence pronounced even before the hearing begins. Unless you wonder about this permanent agenda item 7, it all links up with Goldstone and any of the other commissions of inquiry. We have to appreciate that the Goldstone Commission is a creature of this enabling authority of the UN Human Rights Council, that the resolutions establishing these fact-finding commissions of inquiry predetermine Israeli guilt, that Goldstone reports back to the UN Human Rights Council under this permanent agenda item 7, that out of this permanent agenda item 7 it goes to the UN General Assembly, and so on and so on. And so you have a conveyor belt of the delegitimization of Israel under the banner of human rights, but with the enabling authority of the UN Human Rights Council. Now, I taught the jurisprudence. Alan has taught the jurisprudence of the predecessor UN Human Rights Commission, UN Human Rights Council. What you have to realize is under the aegis of the UN, under the constitution of the UN Human Rights Council is responsible, is the organ responsible for the promotion and protection of human rights. All the people going to all the meetings of the UN Human Rights Council and studying all its decisions, and many of the young students know the UN Human Rights Council as the protective organ in the human rights field under the UN for the promotion and protection of human rights. All this that we know with regard to delegitimization is our narrative. It's not yet understood and part of the mainstream narrative where Israel is the human rights violator in that mainstream narrative. The fourth, and you know this as well, but this is a particularly egregious case study of laundering of delegitimization under the cover of law, and that is the laundering of delegitimization under the cover of the struggle against racism. Who can be against the struggle against racism? Indeed, the worst thing you can say about anybody in the world today is to call them a racist. The very label supplies the indictment. No further proof is required. And so you have the ongoing reference not only to Israel as a racist state, not only to Zionism as racism, but where we've gone dramatically beyond it. To Israel as an apartheid state, where international law defines apartheid as a crime against humanity. So it's an international criminal state. And if that is not enough, as a Nazi state. So not only must this crime against humanity apartheid state be dismantled as an ode to international law, but there's an obligation to dismantle it because there should be no place in the international community for a Nazi state. And all its supporters, all those sitting in this room, all those beyond, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, are collaborators in this criminal enterprise of supporting the apartheid Nazi state. And that's what makes this delegitimization under the cover of the struggle against racism not only so offensive, but really the ultimate also of hypocrisy. And the final thing is the ongoing accusation, particularly during and since the Gaza war, the accusation occurring Israel of genocide, the crime whose name we should even shudder to mention. And so we have the kind of, apocalyptic situation where the only people and the only state in the world today that is themselves the standing target of state-sanctioned incitement to genocide from Ahmadinejad's Iran and its proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. The only state that is a standing target of such state-sanctioned incitement to genocide is accused daily of being itself the perpetrator of genocide, a more Orwellian inversion of history and law and morality one cannot find. Which brings me now to my closing remarks in terms of what is to be done, and again, very quickly. The first thing is, as I've sought to mention here today, that Israel finds itself in an ongoing way in the docket of the accused. And the time has come not simply to always answer as the defendant in the docket of the accused, but to take back the narrative. The paradigm that you have today, the false paradigm which frames the docket of the accused, is that Israel, or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is a source of all conflict in the Middle East and beyond, that the occupation is a source of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that the apartheid Nazi state Israel is the source of the occupation. It's our responsibility to take this paradigm and turn it around, and to make it clear that it is radical Islam with Ahmadinejad's Iran at the epicenter of that radical Islam. That's at the core of the conflict, not only and not even with respect to Israel, but in the Middle East and beyond, in terms of Ahmadinejad's Iran as being the clear and present danger to international peace and security, to Middle East stability and peace, let alone to its own people. That the real apartheid is the refusal to accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state in any borders in the Middle East. And that's the core of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the Israeli-Arab conflict, whatever you wish to characterize. The core is the unwillingness to accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state in any borders. And we should reframe the initiative and reframe the narrative and make that the core of our argument.